No.
Last evening, I spoke to you of the economic challenge before us as Canadians and of our urgent need to act as a true community in a time of crisis. Tonight, I would like to speak to you of the alternatives we had as a government and of the course we must choose as a community to meet that challenge. I would like to talk of what we have asked Canadians to do through the 6 and 5 program, to confront the challenge and to help others who have lost their jobs or who fear for their future. 6 and 5 is not an end. It is a beginning. It is not a solution, but a standard that we can all accept, and by doing so, begin to create solutions. It is not an answer. Indeed, it's really a question of trust and belief. It's not a question of whether Canadians trust this or that government. Do we trust each other? It's not a question of whether Canadians believe what I say. Do we believe that other Canadians will work with us to achieve something that is in everybody's interest? I will tell you this. If we do not trust each other and give ourselves reasons to trust each other, if we do not believe in each other, we will not get to 6 and 5 under the payoff in new investment, new production, and new jobs. We will not get there, whatever the government does. If we fail for lack of trust and belief in each other, because we did not reach out to help each other at a time of crisis, then we will perpetuate one of inflation's most basic causes and most destructive consequences. We will condemn ourselves to living in poisonous distrust of each other, in pervasive disbelief that we're getting our fair share, in debilitating suspicion that everybody else is ripping us off. That's what inflation does. With wages chasing prices, prices chasing profits, profits chasing wages, inflation is a race without winners. We all feel we've been pushed behind. And when we try to catch up, all we do is push others behind, and in the end, pull ourselves down too. I can imagine no darker future for Canada. To fail in such a way would be to condemn us to an endless competition of rich against poor, of strong against weak, of city against province, against region, against country. I would tell you who would win such a competition of Canadian against Canadian. He would be no Canadian. He would be Japanese or German or American. He would be from a country that got its act together because less blessed than we by resources and talent, it had no choice. And if I can paraphrase Pogo, when we met the losers, they would be us. I do not believe we will fail. I believe Canadians are prepared to trust each other, to believe in each other. The evidence is accumulating daily from all parts of the Canadian community that in this regard at least, we're turning away from division toward greater trust. I dwell on the need for trust because what we have achieved so far is young and fragile. We must strengthen our trust in each other because trust is the only bond that will allow us to unite our efforts and combine our strengths to meet the challenge we face. It is the only bond that will allow us to harness our diversity in the service of all Canadians, that will allow us to turn from defeating ourselves to fulfilling our national potential. That is the one thing that distinguishes the course we have asked Canadians to follow from the various alternatives. One such alternative would have been comprehensive controls. The government has rejected that course. Controls could not create the trust in each other and belief in our country that alone would serve our future. Controls would declare with the force of law that Canadians cannot trust Canadians. Controls would not bring us together. They would drive us apart. That's what controls are for, to place the coercive use of government power between Canadians, like a referee who pushes boxers apart and forces them to their corners to rest up so that they can hit each other again. We're only 5 years away from the end of the anti-inflation board. It did serve a short-term economic need. But here we are again already, slugging it out again, Canadian against Canadian, and weaker for it, while other countries, our competitors, have pulled together. We've chosen a course to avoid controls, not inch toward them. And each step we can take, individually and together, towards 6 and 5, will carry us further from controls. I've heard the arguments of those who advocate comprehensive controls. It would be more equitable, they say. It's unfair, they say, to control some wages but not others, some prices but not others. I agree, it's unfair, but it can be made fair if those who preach equity practice equity, if they freely choose to be fair and accept 6 and 5 as their standard. That is the fastest route to equity and the fastest way to build economic recovery. So I ask you this. We're a democratic society. We agree we would be better off at 6% inflation than at 12, at 5 rather than at 10. We agree we should try to reach that goal, even if we don't always agree on how to do it. But surely, if we can agree on that much, if we can agree on what we should do, we can find the will to do it. Or have we come to so distrust each other that we cannot and will not do freely what we know we must? Aside from controls, there was yet another way to fight inflation. It would have destroyed Canada's trust in each other, Canadians' trust in each other, and belief in their country, just as surely as comprehensive controls. That other alternative would have been to tighten the screws on the economy, to cut billions from government spending, to wring out inflation by brute force. That, too, is a seductive argument that also finds its force in the mistrust that is inflation's legacy. The proponents of that alternative claim that the recent jump in the deficit is evidence that we cannot trust government and we cannot trust other Canadians. It must be waste. It must be that somebody somewhere is ripping off the system. Well, I too am concerned about the deficit, but I'm concerned mostly because of what it says about the gravity of our economic crisis. We have had the fastest, sharpest economic decline in a generation. People are out of work. They're not paying taxes. They need help. Companies large and small are burdened with high costs, heavy debts, and they're not paying taxes because their profits have disappeared. They need help. People are not paying taxes on purchases they're not making. Factory furnaces are cold, so energy tax revenues have declined. That is the source of the deficit. Swift, brutal recession. Fewer can contribute. Many more, too many more, need the help that our social programs and our economic policies were specifically intended to provide. So what the advocates of massive cuts are really saying is that the answer to our economic crisis is to cut these lifelines to those who need help just when they need it most, to put more people out of work, to close more factories, to bankrupt more businesses, and turn more producing assets into so much worthless paper on a banker's ledger. That would indeed brutally wring inflation out of the system, and in the process, impoverish many more Canadians. This is the course that led to the Great Depression and 10 lost years. We have rejected that route. Of course I'm concerned about waste, very concerned. Where we find it, we will weed it out. But we will not surrender to the distrust that inflation has spread through our country, and in the name of waste, kick the props from under Canadians striving to overcome the most difficult time of their lives. We will not reduce the deficit when that means cutting the lifeline to farmers and builders and fishermen, trying to stay afloat until we can act together to catch the tide to recovery. To do so would destroy not only trust, but destroy any reason for Canadians to believe that their country can fill their most basic economic needs. The course we have chosen rejects on the one hand the view that Canadians can be trusted to do what must be done only if governments force them to do it. It rejects on the other hand the view that the way to economic recovery lies through yet greater misery. Our course is based on the belief that when Canadians know what is needed of them, they will do it of their own free will. It is based on the belief that if some Canadians reach out, other Canadians will reach back and work with them towards an objective we all share. In truth, the course we have chosen is far more difficult than the alternatives we had. To choose to fight inflation without controls, as a free people acting together, that is the course we chose. We chose to fight waste, to keep the deficit in check, but equally to fight those who, in the name of fighting waste, would drive us into depression. But the hardest choice we had to make was to cap indexing of income taxes and benefits at 6% and 5%. We were thus asking taxpayers, pensioners, public servants, and mothers receiving family allowances to invest a measure of their protection against inflation in order to convince others to join voluntarily in reducing that inflation to 6% and 5%. And for all that governments can do, we could not guarantee that those others would join them. We asked them to share with other Canadians, to provide the funds to put the jobless to work, to lend their strength to meeting a national challenge of overriding importance on the basis only Canadians acting on their own free will now can redeem that faith. I believe that our faith will be redeemed. I believe that on this we will act as a nation.
That was the second of three addresses to the nation by the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Pierre Trudeau, speaking from Ottawa.
Evenings, I've spoken of the coming months as decisive for our economy and for our country. Tonight I would like to speak of what's ahead, of the steps that we need to take together, and of what we can achieve together. We start from the most difficult circumstances that our generation has endured. In our country, as we face the winter, men and women, almost 1.5 million of them, are without jobs. Many of you worry now, as you've never had to worry before, about how you will feed and clothe and house your families in the weeks ahead. Many more live with the worry that your jobs will be next. Relieving the distress among so many Canadians must be, and it is, the foremost goal of our policies. But if we are to lift fear from our lives, we must not just relieve distress. We must recognize and overcome its causes. The whole world, you see, is suffering the effects of this recession. I do not offer this as solace. There's no solace in it for me or for any single Canadian without a job. But when whole countries have fallen before recession, when their well-being, their credit with the world, and their prospects have been crushed in a few months, some Canadian is suffering because of it. We trade or build or invest in virtually every country in the world. For most of us, these countries are distant places on a map. But when a country falters and its people can no longer buy what we have to sell, a Canadian exporter, an investor, a lumber worker, or an engineer is pulled down too. And the rings of distress ripple out to others, to families and neighborhoods, to corner grocers and co-ops, to small town suppliers and big city banks. Canadians who relied upon those countries as markets will have to find others. But in the industrial countries, in the richest lands on earth, more than 30 million people are without jobs, more workers without jobs than there are people in Canada. These millions only recently were among our best customers, but now they're without the means to buy. Those with the means are fewer in number. No, there's no solace in the fact that the face of economic distress can be seen in every country on earth. The ripples of distress ultimately wash over all of us. But it is a reality. And that reality helps define what we cannot do, but also what we can do and must do. What we cannot do is to sell to a world that cannot buy. And until that world can buy again what we have to sell, we cannot fully prosper. Let me put that in terms that many thousands of you live with daily. Our lumber industry is a major employer, a major exporter, a world-class competitor. It is in serious difficulty. So we can help Canadians to build and buy houses and at the same time help an industry in difficulty. And the government is doing precisely that. We are providing, for example, $3,000 for first-time buyers and new home buyers. The provinces are doing much the same, with subsidies, with grants, or with rebates. We are all doing it for the same reason, to create jobs, to ease distress, to create the real wealth that a home represents to every Canadian. Will it return the lumber industry to prosperity? It will help. But the reality is that all the lumber for all the houses we could build in Canada in a boom year can be produced by just two lumber companies in British Columbia. So who would buy the lumber from the other 1,350 lumber companies, large and small, that are struggling to survive? That, you see, is the reality we face. So I will not tell you there's a simple solution. There is not. I will not tell you there's a quick solution. There is not. If there is a solution, it lies in turning our efforts to what we must do and can achieve, not in dissipating our energies on what we want to do, but for now cannot. We cannot force the world to buy houses. We can prepare ourselves to supply more lumber, cheaper, better, and faster, when the world does begin to build houses again. We can mobilize the resources of the mind to preserve our industries and improve them, to keep families and communities and skilled teams of workers, scientists, and managers together, so that when recovery does begin, Canadians will be there first and they will be ready. If we cannot fully employ ourselves in production, we must employ ourselves in preparation to produce and transport and compete and sell when the world is ready to buy. And if we are to be ready when the world is ready, we must recognize another reality, the nature of the competition we now face. Recession has driven other countries, because they are determined or because they are desperate, to compete harder to keep their share of a shrinking world market. We face a world, as I have said, where the survival of the fittest nations has become the rule of life. Those nations that are now proving themselves fit to survive the worst recession of our generation will be fit to seize the rewards of recovery when it comes. That reward will be a growing share of a growing market. I can tell you that the government is determined to help Canada to seize its share of recovery. But what matters more is the determination of Canadians to join in that effort. And every day the evidence grows in the midst of economic distress that our determination is increasing. I believe that the path to recovery is becoming more clear. The steps we must take better defined. The will to take them together more broadly shared. And I believe there is a recognition that there are no shortcuts as we climb out of what is toward what can be. Let me speak of the steps we're taking and where they lead. Last summer, we faced three dangers. The world recession was deepening, and the real wealth of many Canadians was being lost. That was the first danger. Rising prices were spurring other Canadians to pursue inflationary gains, and our costs were being forced up even as our competitors' costs were declining dramatically. That was the second danger. Under these incredible pressures, confidence in our country was crumbling, and with our confidence, our capacity to act together. That was the third and greatest danger. We moved to confront these three dangers through the 6 and 5 program by taking the first step, the essential step that could lead us back toward recovery. It was directed to bringing down our costs to what our competitors were already achieving, to cutting inflation to 6 and 5, and then more, I hope, over the next years, by holding the prices and wages set by government to that level and asking others to join and to do the same. By confronting inflation head-on in order to restore our comparative position in world markets, it was directed to stopping the loss of jobs, to securing the jobs we have, and to relieving the distress of those without jobs and incomes. It was directed to restoring our capacity to act as a true community. Well, our progress has been clear. I believe the danger to existing jobs is lessening as our efforts to preserve these jobs is increasing. Our costs are coming down. The prices of telephone calls, of cable television, of air travel and freight, of milk, of postage stamps have been constrained. The provinces are beginning to join in constraining their prices as they have in constraining their wages. Our inflation is coming down. Our interest rates are coming down. As our inflation halts, as our inflation falls further, so can our interest rates fall further. And the momentum is increasing toward the lower cost economy that will give us the means to compete and to create secure jobs when recovery comes. But our greatest progress has been in pulling together as a community. I think truly that we have all surprised ourselves. Here we are, all in the same boat, and we're all beginning to pull in the same direction. And suddenly, we know that we're beginning to pull in the same direction. And we know that it's the right direction. These are rare moments in the life of any nation. And for all that governments can do, they cannot create such moments. The government can try, and it can hope. But if such happenings are genuine, they can only come from a people that suddenly finds its way, that knows the difficulties ahead, and decides to overcome them. Those of you who are skeptical, I ask you to look again at what your fellow Canadians are doing and see for yourselves. Those of you who can help to make it happen, I ask you to seek out the ways, and there are ways. Those of you employers, for instance, who think you must eliminate jobs to cut costs, why don't you tell your employees what the choices are and ask them the choices they would make? You may be surprised. Workers all over the country have been prepared to share work to save other workers' jobs and to make some sacrifice to save the companies that employ them. Those of you bankers who see farmers and small businessmen struggling to keep the land alive and the doors open for a better time, ask yourselves, what will be served by a bailiff's padlock? Why don't you take a chance on a Canadian? You may be surprised. Those of you union leaders who fear for the future of organized labor, ask yourselves if the working man will be better served by his leaders sitting on the sidelines or by playing a central role in overcoming a national crisis. Why don't you ask your members? You may be surprised. But these ways are not confined to the powerful. Each of you can play a role by helping a friend or a neighbor, by speaking up when people around you hurt others by what they do, or fail to help, but by what they do not do. Those are the ways in which you can help staunch the wounds of recession, restore our country's capacity to compete with the best, and clear the way to the next steps towards recovery. I know of no one who would define our potential, who would define Canada's future by 6 and 5 or by any number. But we can define our potential when we declare by our success that we Canadians do what we set out to do. If to overcome our difficulties and help each other through distress, we can give birth to a new and enduring national partnership, we will have fashioned the means to achieve what can be. Out of crisis, we will have fashioned a true community. We will have restored our confidence to seek the best as a country, without fear that other Canadians will hold back and wait for guarantees of what will never come if we never act. We will have found the route to a new national policy, one born of our century, and reflecting the new demands of our century. With it, we can seize and mold the next century, the future, for Canadians. That is what can be. I believe we're seeing now a determination to seize that century for Canada. And I believe that our determination is making each of us a witness at the rebirth of our nation.
That was the last of 3 addresses to the nation by the Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Pierre Trudeau, speaking from Ottawa.